Chapter 15 of Her Love from Above. Madison's final demand. Johnny heard little Miss's frantic cry as he passed Paige's room. He froze. Paige was downstairs eating, so why was little Miss crying from inside her room? "They want the collar," Teasel reminded. The collar, Johnny suddenly remembered. Without a second thought, he opened Paige's door and entered. Little Miss was caught inside a cat trap at the far side of the bed. "Of course," he hissed, hurrying to the cage and flipping open the door. The frantic cat darted through the opening and out of the room. Johnny could only shake his head. Paige and Madison were going all out to get their hands on that collar. "Charlie and Buck need to know what they're doing," Teasel informed. "How about speaking with them about it tonight?" Johnny sighed. Before the evening ended, he needed to let Buck and Charlie know what Paige and Madison were doing, and if those were genuine diamonds on that collar, which he sincerely doubted after learning more about Auntie, then they needed to know so it could be put in a safe place before it vanished forever. Teasel followed little Miss as she ran inside Jenny's bedchamber and hid beneath the bed. She was shaking with fright, having been trapped inside the cage for far too long. Teasel regretted having to leave her there, but Johnny needed to find her so he could tell Charlie what his relatives were doing. With a gentle hand, the angelic warrior bent down and picked up the trembling Siamese. "It's okay now," he soothed, rubbing her tiny head. "I'm sorry I couldn't release you sooner, but Johnny needed to find you there." He unsnapped the collar and removed it from her neck. "It'll be safer for you without this." He placed the cat collar back on the floor and walked through the walls until he reached Madison's room, then sprang the trapdoor on the second cage to prevent little Miss from repeating her adventure. Then he hung the collar on one of its bars. Madison would find it and assume little Miss had lost it while attempting to retrieve the treats. "They set traps for you," he informed no one, "but we've returned the favor." Lieutenant Chazaquay entered the room immediately as Teasel finished speaking. His small trek to Jenny's hometown had proven successful because both the department store security camera and the godly woman who saw Almond's bruised and bleeding body as he hurried to the exit could identify him as being in that area at the time of Alma's call. "Yes," the lieutenant agreed. "As the Father's word promises, those who set traps for others will fall into them themselves." "How'd it go?" Teasel asked. Lieutenant Chazaquay grinned. "Good. Almond intended not to be seen, at least not well enough to be identified. Now, not only was he seen by everyone within 50 yards of the phone book, but he was also beaten black and blue, videoed on the local store's security camera, and can be identified by the woman who owns that store. That's going to be a real surprise to him." "Why?" Teasel asked. "He should have been expecting cameras." "Because yesterday he sent Joffrey to the stores in that area to ensure there were no working security cameras. Joffrey found two, but neither of them worked. One was miraculously fixed right before Almond entered the store." He smiled. "Vivian will be surprised to discover that her camera is now recording. She's been saving to purchase another one, but now she can use that money to buy Christmas presents for her grandchildren." Teasel laughed in delight. Lieutenant Chazaquay continued. "I wanted to check in before heading to the FBI agents working on Almond's case. There are a few things that need clearing up before tonight. I'm hoping to be back before Alma and Joffrey arrive, but there's no guarantee." "See you then," Teasel said. "I'll inform Nahath that you might be a bit later than we expected." Johnny walked down the stairs toward the lodge's central meeting just as Tally stepped onto the raised platform to speak. A loud and boisterous gasp sounded from the far side of the room, and Madison sprang to her feet. "How dare you?" she fumed. "How dare you? I told you to leave." Charlie stood moments later, indicating that Johnny should join them at their table. Johnny paused at the bottom step, turned to meet Charlie's eyes, then began moving toward the table of honor. He needed to stand firm in the presence of his abuser, not only for his own sake, but for all the survivors who resided at Haven's Rest. As Ava said, it would be a tremendous encouragement for them. "Mother," Madison demanded, "why isn't he gone?" Paige glared at Charlie. She could do nothing when he was standing with her son-in-law, but she would never forgive him, and she would spend every penny she had to ensure this preposterous ministry was closed. "I'll deal with this later," she informed Madison while keeping her voice calm so she didn't look like the villain. "Sit down for now." "No," Madison screamed. "I will not sit down. I will not be a part of this charade. If this place was built to help victims of domestic violence, then he would have been run off." "Madison," Paige calmly whispered. Although she attempted to sound composed, her voice was more desperate than before because she could read the room's atmosphere, which was not in their favor. "We can deal with him later. Right now, just sit down and let Miss Tally speak." "I will not," Madison screamed, glaring at her mother. "You're just like them. You don't care how horribly he treats me. No one cares. This ministry is a joke. I'm out of here. I don't need any more abuse." "Madison, please," her mother begged. But before she could finish her sentence, Madison was storming up the stairs. When she reached the top, she turned and glared at her audience. "You're all a bunch of hypocrites," she shrieked. "All of you. You don't care how he has treated me. If you did, you would do something about this." Silence filled the lodge as her footsteps pounded down the hallway. Finally, a voice whispered. "That might have been a little more convincing if she had a little inflection in her tone," a second voice suggested. Hushed giggles filled the silence. "Okay," Tally began. "I think it's time we continue with the scheduled program. As most of you know, Auntie always liked to begin with a comical anecdote. Somewhere along the years, this anecdote became a competition between regular speakers. Last count I had, Jenny's dung pudding story was in first place, and I was running a close second with deer in the headlights. There were a few giggles as residents recalled those stories. Today, I'm going to blow away all my competitors, myself included, and if we did a 40-year best winner, this one would take first place in that competition as well." "It's got to be true," someone reminded. Tally laughed. "Believe me, it's true. I was there." She smiled. "First, I shall apologize about this being at an actual funeral." She shrugged. "You can't choose where a narcissist sticks up their head. I don't believe we've ever had a funeral story before, at least not that I'm aware of, and I debated on whether or not to tell it. But dang, some things are just too funny not to share." Charlie poked Claire's ribs, which caused her to squeal in surprise. Everyone looked in their direction. "I'm sorry," she apologized, her face reddening, "but it's his fault. He poked me." Charlie grinned and raised his hands, pretending innocence. "Like they're going to believe that," Claire fussed, playfully smacking his arm. "Hey, none of that here," a male voice declared from the back of the room. "We'll send you to your room." "That won't work," Charlie teased. "There's a cat sneaking around this place, and she doesn't believe in giving people their privacy." Chuckles of laughter arose. "Besides," a female voice reminded, "we've got the winning story to hear." Claire smacked Charlie again with a pretend frown on her face. "You're interrupting the winner," she scolded. Snickers again sounded. "Okay," Tally said. "Shall we begin?" "Yes," came a chorus of replies. Tally nodded. "A certain attorney's client," she pointed to herself, "passed away a few weeks back. Throughout the years, this client caused this attorney more headaches than all her other clients combined. But since she was responsible for drawing up the client's will, among other things, she felt obligated to attend the funeral. Besides, she wanted to meet the family before the reading of the will. Tally stared down, crinkled her brows toward the floor, and then looked back at the crowd. When she entered the funeral home, she received a bulletin showing the service order, which was planned to the nth detail. She chuckled to herself, then continued. This client had 3 daughters. I'll call these young ladies Daughter A, Daughter B, and Daughter C. When it came time for the first speaker, who happened to be Daughter A, she stood and walked forward, positioned herself in front of the small gathering, and began sharing about her mom while presenting a slideshow. I'm guessing that she chose the pictures because she was in nearly every one of them, and she talked more about herself than her mom. About 2 minutes into her presentation, Daughter B, outraged, stood, marched to the front of the room, positioned herself beside her sister, and began speaking to the crowd. She was livid because there weren't enough pictures of her in the slideshow. Tally shook her head and said, Daughter B raised her voice, so it was louder than Daughter A's. Wait a minute, someone said while needing clarification. You mean both daughters were speaking at the same time? That's what I mean, Tally acknowledged. Both daughters were trying to outspeak each other. And this is a true story? Another lady asked, her voice skeptical. Tally put her hand over her heart and said, I swear to it, I was there. That must have been some mother to raise 2 women like that, Buck commented. Tally rolled her eyes. She was. I usually referred to her as my witch client. I don't know how often I threatened to fire her as a client, but I never did. I probably should have, but I wouldn't be the all-time winner of this competition if I had. Jenny laughed. You've got to finish the story before you can be deemed the winner. What did the funeral director do? Another voice questioned. Tally scratched her temple. I haven't finished with the daughter's part yet. Okay, Jenny admitted. You've won the prize. Now, finish the story. Tally waited for the laughter to diminish. Well, as this shouting match between Daughter A and Daughter B raged, Daughter C stood and walked forward. No, someone contended. You've got to be kidding. This is not a real story. Tally continued without commenting. She positioned herself to the left of Daughter A and began trying to outspeak her sisters. Loud and boisterous laughter broke loose around the room. Tally shook her head in awe as she fought to remain lucid. She didn't want to lose control, or she'd never finish the narrative. As the laughter in the room continued, Claire doubled over with tears flowing from her eyes. She was beyond being able to control herself, and every few seconds she gasped while trying to suck in enough air to keep breathing. All eyes, Tally's included, eventually turned toward her. Is she all right? Jenny finally asked. Yes, she'll calm down in a minute. Ever so often, when something hits her funny bone just right, she goes into a laughing frenzy like this. Sometimes it makes her unable to breathe. Give her a minute and she'll be back with us. Unless this story gets much funnier, then we might need to make an emergency run to the hospital. He smiled, showing he was teasing. We've got oxygen in the office, Buck joked. I can always hook her up to it. A couple of minutes later, when Claire was finally composed, Charlie handed her a napkin to dry her face. I'm sorry, she apologized, but this is priceless. Auntie would have loved this one. What'd the pastor do? Someone quizzed, turning Tally's attention back to the story. Tally took a deep breath, then admitted, He looked like a deer in headlights. Maybe I should have saved that title for this story. Giggles sounded. Tally continued, None of us knew what to do. It was like a 3-ring circus. That's the title, someone called out. The 3-ring circus. Well, that fits, Tally agreed. It was a three-ring circus. Mercy. No one could understand much of what they were saying, and they were all so animated that I'd swear they should have been professional actresses. Hollywood missed its chance with these sisters. Anyway, I was closest to daughter C, so I could hear her a little better. And what she was saying was bizarre. She was yelling about her sisters didn't have a clue how it felt to lose someone they loved, but she did. They just lost their mom, Jenny interrupted. That's crazy. What planet does she live on? I don't think there was much love lost between them and their mom, if the truth be told, Tally admitted. Anyway, daughter C claimed she was the only one who understood what it was like to lose someone they loved because she had lost her first husband a few years earlier. She said he was the love of her life, her soulmate, and she would never love anyone like she loved him. Now, consider this one fact. Her current husband was sitting in the audience just in front of me. No, someone moaned. They should all three be admitted to Osawatomie, a voice offered. What's Osawatomie? Someone asked. A mental hospital in Kansas, the voice replied. The same hospital would be best, Buck stated. The same room, too, someone else suggested. It'd save a lot of misery and money because they'd kill each other. Tally continued. The minister tried to get the daughters to behave by pleading, Ladies, please don't do this. We're trying to honor your mother. Could you please sit back down? But that just turned the daughter's ire toward him. Finally, when daughter C's husband stood and walked out, several others left with him. But the daughters didn't seem to notice because they were too busy screaming at each other. How did it finally end? Jenny asked. The pastor closed the service with all three daughters screaming at the dwindling crowd and each other. She grinned. I promise. It was the strangest and shortest funeral service I've ever attended. What kind of woman raises three narcissists? Claire asked. Charlie squeezed her arm lightly. One who is herself one, I think. Madison heard the laughter rising from the lodge meeting room, which only fueled her anger. She knew they were laughing at her. She had thrown a fit, and instead of being indignant at her pain and forcing Johnny to leave as was appropriate, they were mocking her. They were acting like he was the victim and she the villain, and now he was the one sitting at the table of honor with Uncle Charlie and Aunt Claire. In a moment of anger, she threw her brush against the mirror of the antique dresser and watched as it cracked down the middle. She cocked one eyebrow while she thought. She would rip the entire room to shreds if she could without being caught. That's how she punished the last best friend who turned on her, tearing everything in her apartment to shreds, especially the items she valued. Her friend knew she had done it, but with no proof, there was nothing the authorities could do. That's something she would remember for future reference. No evidence, no crime. Laughter again floated up the stairs, which only bolstered Madison's rage. Charlie wasn't falling for any of her antics. They worked on nearly everyone else, so why weren't they working on him? She picked up a shoe and threw it at the mirror, causing a second break to crawl from one side to the other. She watched the door to her bedchamber, expecting someone to enter for the purpose of comforting her so she could again demand that Johnny be escorted from the property. But no one came. Instead, such a loud cry of laughter arose from the meeting room that she figured everyone within a mile's radius could hear it. She cursed and threw herself on the bed. She had managed to get Johnny thrown out of several restaurants by throwing fits, yet her uncle didn't seem to care. He ignored her like she was a nobody. There wasn't a person on this property who was as unique and special as her, yet they were all ignoring her. and her despicable uncle was leading the charge. Even her mother was cowering beneath his words. How dare he, she fumed, her eyes growing blurry with tears of indignation. She jumped to her feet and headed toward the closet. She wasn't staying at this wretched place even 1 minute longer. Her mother would be here for the reading of the will, but she didn't need to be. Besides, if she wanted to return on Friday, she could. Right now, she needed to distance herself from this place and everyone connected with it so she could clear her head. Madison grabbed her clothes and began thrusting them inside her suitcase. If her mother wanted to stay, that was her business. She cocked her eyebrow again. Maybe she would go home. It would be funny if her mother had to find her own ride. Better yet, it would be priceless if she was forced to ride with Johnny in his truck. She cast a wicked grin. She couldn't imagine a better punishment than her mom having to ride in that horrible work truck. And it would serve her right for not forcing Charlie to abide by her wishes. She grabbed a pair of shoes and threw them inside her suitcase. When she turned to grab a second pair, a sparkle of light caught her attention. At first, she didn't think much of it, but then it caught her attention again, and then a third time. Curious, she turned to see what it was, which was when she noticed the cat trap's door snapped shut. No wonder, she fumed. I bet Johnny snuck up here and... Her sentence trailed off when she saw little Mrs. Diamond Collar caught on the side of the cage. I am so out of here, she muttered while unhooking the collar and examining it. These diamonds and Johnny's life insurance money are plenty for now. Unable to subdue the smug expression, she zipped it inside her suitcase. Her mother could find her own way home, or go to the great hereafter, for all she cared, as long as she was out of her life. Madison thought of the glue mousetraps she had scattered all over the basement floor earlier that evening, hoping to catch little Miss. Wasted money, she fussed, but still, her grin could not be suppressed. She had planned to sneak down and remove them before anyone was the wiser, but now, with everyone downstairs mocking her, she decided to leave them instead. Someone, and she hoped it would be her uncle, would have lots of fun if they entered the basement in the dark. She laughed again. Things were finally turning in her favor.